thank you for the introductions. I like to thank you for the introduction because it kind of gives me a handle. And we are here in the month of May for Affordable Housing Month. Yay. This is also election year. People spread the word. Buy for bonds. We need that to pass through. So, with that being said, I'd like to welcome everybody, individual organizations that you're representing to this meeting because this is really an important meeting. We really need to begin to better collaborate because we need to make some traction on things happening with housing. We all know that there's a crisis. Point in time count this occurred January, I think it was the 25th, and it went down, but not it went up, but not substantially. And we also have to be mindful of the fact of the weather, of when the count happened. And so, with that being said, we want to keep making inroads in organizing people for housing, having housing as a human right. We want to take away the monetization of housing here in North America. And so I'm going to pass the mic on to Vanna.
Okay. Thank you, Arlene.
Sure thing.
Appreciate that. Thanks for moderating this. This is like a lovely intro. I just want to offer everybody a big, warm EBHO, East Bay Housing Organizations welcome, and a huge thanks to you guys, the East Bay Gray Panthers and the other Panthers that are here today, for pulling this together and for what you're about to present. We're really excited that this is part of Affordable Housing Month this year. We at EBHO have been for 40 years working with our members to produce and preserve and protect affordable housing throughout the East Bay. And, you know, all of us in the East Bay have certainly been touched by this crisis. We're really familiar with the problem, but we're not always sure what the solutions might be. And this is really solvable, but the only way we can do that is with people power. So first off, we'd like to start by celebrating our wins. There's been millions of dollars raised for affordable housing this year, new affordable homes built, and passage of tenant protections. So those are huge wins that we're thrilled about. And that's part of our celebration this month. And the other part of our celebration this month are all the other events happening. I'll put in the chat a link to the other events that are free, that are part of this celebration this month, so you guys can. Oh, thanks, Kiki. Kiki already put it in the chat, so you can see what other events are happening, and hopefully you can enjoy some of those. But also the other things we want to share with you, something that we could all sort of engage in right now, and Arlene, you were starting to talk about this, was two of our major ballot measure campaigns. We're gearing up for the 2024 ballot. First off is the 9-county Bay Area Regional Bond Project. It's going to raise 10 to 20 billion for new affordable homes across the region. I see some nodding heads, so I think you guys know what I'm talking about. And the second ballot measure would be to reduce the voter approval threshold for affordable housing bonds to a simple majority, down from the 2/3 required right now. So it also looks like you guys are familiar with this, but we'll also put a link in the chat for the Bay Area Housing for All, so you can get engaged as well and help push these measures through and get them approved in 2020 this year.
Vanna, is that ACA1? Is that the measure?
I think that's the name of it. Kiki, do you know if that's the name of it, or Jeff?
ACA1 is the name of the bill that would put it on the ballot. It hasn't been placed, so it doesn't have a proposition number yet.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. So we'll put the Bay Area Housing for All.org link in the chat for you, so you can follow that as it develops. We also want to highlight for you the EBHO study room. You can go to a study room. We'll also put this link in the chat. You can go there to learn more about the history of our housing crisis and also about the work that's being done to address it. And lastly, I just want to invite everybody who's not already a member of EBHO to join us as a member. It's a wonderful organization, and we would just love for you to become active members. I can tell this group is an incredibly active group, and you're probably already members, but if there are any of you that are not, we'd love for you to become a member and get active with our committees. And the link is just, Kiki just put that in the chat. And thank you, Kiki. If you guys haven't met Kiki yet, she's our Chief Operating Officer at EBHO, our fabulous Kiki, and she's here today. She's also a wealth of information, as is Jeff, who, oh yeah, Kiki's saying reach out to her if you need anything. And Jeff is our Chief Legislative Strategist, so he is another great resource. So anyway, hope you enjoy the event, and thanks again, Arlene, for moderating this.
Thank you so much, Ben. I really appreciate that information and really kind of bringing us up to speed on what's going to be happening this year, because we have some really important things that are going to be happening this year. And we really want people power. As you said, we want people power to back these things because we need movement. And the only way we have movement is with people power. We have to participate. So with that being said, my next introduction is going to be Art from the San Francisco Gray Panthers. And Art, oh boy, I went to the San Francisco, I'm just going to say this quickly. I went to the meeting and I was just so impressed with the education I got just by attending meetings. Sometimes just by attending meetings, you get educated on so many things. And so I'd like to bring Art on and so that he could share some information with us. Art?
Thank you, Arlene. Yeah, I was brought on to provide an introduction to one of our major presenters today, and that is Betsy Morris. She's the co-convener of the Berkeley East Bay Gray Panthers, as many of you know. She and I are also members of the National Council of Gray Panther Network's Issues Committee, as well as the National Council of Gray Panther Network Senior Housing Subcommittee, both of which meet monthly with Gray Panther members from all over the country. Betsy, as you will, if you don't already know that, you will find out, is a very well-informed advocate for and activist on housing issues, and with her extensive background, activism, and expertise, has provided valuable input to a National Council of Gray Panther Network's Gray Paper on the U.S. nursing home crisis, which we put out previously, and is now involved in the effort to create another Gray Paper, this time on our national affordable housing crisis. She's traveled far and wide, especially in Europe, with her partner and co-convener, Rains Cohen, to gather information and study examples of how people and organizations in other countries innovate to create affordable housing where they live. And if Betsy's ready, I am honored to present to you now Betsy Morris. Drum roll, please.
Betsy, do you hear the drum roll? We might be, I know she said she had some internet issues going on where she's at. Is Betsy available?
You have to mute me.
Yeah. You're just sorry. You're
Might be two different voice sources right now. So they should shut down one.
So Rains has two on. He needs one so he doesn't get the echo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
While we're waiting, there's a few other members of the National Council of Gray Panther Networks here. I want to recognize Carol Crooks of Berkeley Gray Panthers, Richard Solomon of Santa Barbara Gray Panthers, and Michael David Bendor of, is it the Ann Arbor Gray Panthers? Please correct me if I'm wrong about that, Michael.
We're technically the Public Citizens of Washtenaw, having changed our name to try to get more diverse population. Could you hear me, Art?
Yes, thank you, Michael. Yeah, these bodies, of the National Council of Great Panther Networks, have been meeting for several years. The Issues Committee first, and then the Senior Housing Subcommittee grew out of the emerging COVID pandemic, when it was noticed that people in nursing homes were dying in great numbers.
You're going to show this? Show me first. Okay. All right.
We can hear you, Betsy.
I think we're ready. Yeah. The technical details of multi-devices. I should say, first off, I want to thank,
Speak to me there.
with this
Yeah,
way?
yeah.
Okay. I want to thank Arlene, who is been a Grey Panther member for I don't know, a few years, and has become a partner in crime. She refuses to serve on the board, but is instead active with Poor People's Campaign and advisory boards all over the country. I mean, I'm always in awe of the connections she has made, and I'm also just incredibly grateful to have found a kind of sister from another mother, soulmate, intellectual, just fabulous. And she knows how to run a meeting, especially a large public event. So I just want to say, Carol Crooks is my co-convener, and I'm incredibly grateful for her, because as verbose as I am, she cuts to the quick. She's good. And I also just need to say that my partner, my husband, Rains Cohen, is my tech support, and I guess sometimes my punching bag for frustrations. But I want to thank him enormously for getting this complex set up. And we'll just say that it's a privilege to have so many members of the Affordable Housing Month. That should say Affordable Housing Month. And I'm grateful that EBHO is here. That said, this is purely the work of myself, not to blow myself up, but just to say none of the other organizations, except for my Grey Panthers chapter and the National Council, has endorsed, they are the folks who've given me this platform to share this information with all of you. And I'm very, very grateful for that. But we're not affiliated directly with EBHO. This is not an EBHO presentation. And the only people I'm speaking for is myself and my chapter. But I'm hoping very soon we'll have other allies as a result of this. So Rains is going to be changing to our next slide. This is the title of this talk is Housing is a Human Right, Lessons from Europe and the International Social Housing Festival. First, I'm just going to, next, I should say. What are we at, Rains? Okay, I'm sorry, go back. I've got two devices here. I am so high tech. There, no.
Arrow, whatever.
Okay, so all of this is a work in progress, very much. But what do we mean by housing as a human right? Well, when the United Nations was founded, established in San Francisco, a statement of housing as a human right is part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the UN, and signed by many signatories. And that's important because this is something many countries, including our own, signed on to this declaration. And under international law, treaties that the US has signed, everyone has the right to adequate housing. Adequate housing is more than just a roof over one's head. It includes security of tenure, which means that you know how long you have it for, protection against forced evictions, and availability of service. These languages are actually from UN documents. And just to say that it's an aspirational document, and who's going to make it happen? We are, not governments, even though they signed in our name. So a few years back, 2017, 2018, our Grey Panthers chapter convened a public meeting about the human rights, civil rights of the unhoused. And it was attended by some of the incredible visionary leaders around the Bay Area, but several in particular who had started the Here There camp here in Berkeley. They had started in San Francisco and been pushed out and moved multiple times. And they were the founders of First They Came for the Homeless. And First They Came for the Homeless came to our meeting with Meiklejohn Civil Liberties Institute, Meiklejohn, of an established advocacy organization that was that supported the UN and this human right. Housing is a human right. Ann Fagan Ginger came and spoke to 90 people. And as a result of that, we, Gray Panthers, met in the Vault Cafe with 14 other people, most of whom were from different homeless housing advocacy, leadership, or developers of homeless housing. And it was an incredible privilege to be there, because what I heard from what was essentially an 8-part charter of what we eventually created jointly, called the Bay Area Landless Peoples Alliance, which survived very minimally under COVID. 5 of the leaders of First They Came for the Homeless died in the early part of 2020, not from COVID, but from living on the streets. But BALPA still exists as a Facebook page, and is closely tied with our work with HOG, or the Homeless Action Working Group in Oakland, also known as Shelter Oak. And I say this because it was really the work with the unhoused and the concept of the right to land, the right to have a self-governing, to be neighbors and create a real mutual care housing with each other, whether it's in tents or vehicles or sitting on a sidewalk, that these are parts of our human rights and voices that we don't hear in most of the debates about funding or even tenant protections. So it's important to me and our Gray Panther chapter that the voices of every group that's holding up for the right to live, the right to be housed in a community, for example. It's very important that this be part of the conversation coming up. Today, we don't have representatives from the Wood Street Commons or Here There, which failed, but Wood Street Commons is part of 3 or 4 self-help encampments that are working on their own concept of housing and will be part of the public debate very soon. So next, I know that was long-winded. So this next slide, which I can't see, there it is. This is part of the concept of housing as a human right that I am encountering. There's lots of, but that come from the official organization behind the Social Housing Festival. So affordability, habitability, cultural adequacy, sustainability, location, within reach of vital amenities, accessibility, security of tenure, and availability of services. So I encourage any of you to do the Command Shift 4 or Command Shift 3 and capture these images so you might be able to look at.
We'll be posting it in the video afterwards.
Okay, thanks.
So no need, don't feel like people have to write everything down.
No, you don't need to write it all down. It's huge. So what do we have here in the US? Well, this is my professional opinion. I do have degrees and spent many years working more formally in the professional capacity, and in trying to understand our housing policy and housing policy and policies about the poor in particular. We have 75 years, 1934, I think, various acts were passed in the Depression under FDR. And in 1937, we had a housing policy that was actually pretty good. But we have what we have now today, 75 years of proposals for stable housing and the rights of tenants corrupted, co-opted by conservative segregationists, real estate associations, and their lobbyists. And let me just pause. A number of people joining us are realtors or real estate agents, and I'm incredibly grateful that you want to be part of this conversation. But the people who represent you, the National Association of Realtors and the California Association of Realtors, have publicly admitted to their practices, racist and sometimes illegal practices, to undermine fair housing law in California and nationally. They have apologized. You can go to their websites and see those apologies. This is not the best representation, but there is a new entity modeled after the National Realtors Party, the California Realtors Party, which, despite their apologies, exists as a group to put forward laws that protect the rights of homeowners and protect the rights of the property, to increase the value of their homes. So if you know how the rhetoric goes for opponents of affordable housing or any kind of rights for the homeless, preserving property values is used by the realtors to justify any number of egregious pieces of propaganda that I first became aware of them, because they are funders to destroy TOPA, Tenant Opportunity Purchase Act. They are continually spending millions of dollars, hundreds of millions, to lobby against rent control expansion. It's very clear they already designed, the Realtors Associations designed the redlining maps. They used them informally, and then the federal government and banks asked for copies of them. And so this is a lineage that is, I'm going to say it. We say we have opponents, but these are hundreds of millions of dollars here in California to prevent the kinds of housing justice or just right to housing that certainly many of us would like to see. It's so 4550, what is this number? We are in a time of great opportunity, although it is a time of crisis. 45% of Californians are now renters. 55% are homeowners. This is the highest number of renters and the lowest number of homeowners that California has ever seen. And that's part of the, I'm looking in the wrong place. I like to look at you all, not my own presentation. I've been looking at this for a long time. 45 to 55. So this is an opportunity. And, there've been, I know there are flyers all over California calling for tenants' rights, especially after COVID, when new rights were established, but now they're gone. And the evictions are already starting up again. This is one petition. This is one ballot proposition in Berkeley. Berkeley has tended to operate as a freewheeling of an independent agent. And I'm saying here now, as someone who supports this petition, we have to stop doing it one city at a time. This is a movement. We need to create, I'm sorry, I'm getting my rant on. This talk is about saying why we need to talk to each other, collaborate, build up structures that are continually working to create a new paradigm and a new vision. And this is what I learned in Europe. This just happens to be one of the recent rallies, Gray Panthers, myself, and this is with one of the groups we're a member of, the Poor People's Campaign. Nell Hand is one of the leadership, and this is our own wonderful Arlene.
We were at the Wood Street. I need to interject. We were at the Wood Street Commons 1-year anniversary.
Thank you.
And that's what we were attending.
Yeah. And it was a great and lively event. And they're having another event. We can talk about it later, but June 14th, I think. All right. So while I'm learning and catching up with various California coalitions, particularly the Social Housing Coalition out of Southern California, this popped up. I don't know who sent it to me or why it showed up, but you know, the ways of the internet knows. So the International Social Housing Festival was held last June in Barcelona, Spain. And thanks to a great set of wonderful circumstances and my husband knowing how to work plane credits, this was a free event, just had to get there, and I was able to get there. And in the process, I got the thank you, Gray Panthers, for letting me represent the National Council at this event. It just gave me a kick to have that title. 2,000 participants, people from 87 countries, and it was hosted by the city of Barcelona. What I discovered among the highlights, let's go this. Okay, it was the 4th such festival. I'd never heard of it before, but what I had heard of is that it was inspired by Leilani Farha, who was the UN rapporteur who came in her 6-7-year term of office. In 2017, she came to the Bay Area and she talked with, first they came for the homeless and Wood Street encampment and many people. And she said and wrote in a report, she had never seen such conditions except in very dire third world countries. And not even today, necessarily. And she was also very passionate. She's from Canada, which has suffered a lot of the same kinds of real estate issues and trends and crises in housing that we have. She's the producer, of a movie called Shift, which was a documentary about the role of the equity. Remember, we had the equity partners, the hedge funds that are buying up single family homes and multifamily homes and student housing and affordable housing for seniors, even. So she was aghast and created a nonprofit to let people know, grassroots and governments, of the dangers of this trend. And so when she was in Europe, she was telling everyone she met, network, network, network. Well, she didn't deliver that message to us, but I'm delivering it for her. And she was the instigator. She was the reason this festival came into being back in 2017. And it's been held in 4 cities, Lyon, France, Amsterdam, Helsinki, and now Barcelona. And next in 2025, it'll be in Dublin. And I learned about this festival and the pieces that were part of it, beginning with Barcelona itself. So cities, the Barcelona Social Housing Plan, back in 2013, actually, a woman who was the housing commissioner or housing minister, Barcelonans and around Spain, they elect not just a city council or a mayor, they elect a minister of housing. What a concept. And that person has autonomy, has as much autonomy as the mayor to use, and specifically is responsible for housing policies and production. So the mayor spoke and brought with her a special abridged version of the Barcelona Housing Plan, which you can just see a lot. You can Google this, you can read it. I have my copy with me. And essentially, this commissioner ran for mayor and won, and proceeded. It's always backwards. I'm sure
It's good.
Yeah. And I wish I could share it with you. I am a data wonk. But the point was that she committed the city to build, I think, something like 9,000 more social housing units. By that, she meant public housing and housing built by private cooperatives, housing cooperatives, and nonprofit housing, like we have community housing developers here. And that's the basis of EBHO is actually an association of these nonprofit cooperative, of the nonprofit housing sector here in the East Bay, but there's groups like it all over the state. And about 8,000 of those units, not just public, but also cooperative, private limited equity cooperatives, as well as these community housing developers, had built between 8,000 and 9,000 by the time we met in Barcelona. And she also lost her re-election bid. And I'm glad to say since then, the new mayor also renewed the commitment to complete the plan, which would add another 3,000 units. So we're talking about almost doubling the number of what we would call affordable housing units. And I put this in quotes because I'm not going to, I just don't want to get into a discussion about who considers what housing to be affordable. But the main thing is that it's permanently, the cost of housing is set in these units. It's set to be aggregated, it reflects the income and the whole, rather than the profit. So prices, rents and housing prices in this sector, in this labeled big tent label of social housing, it was so confusing. Everyone asked me what's social housing, and it's not a type of housing, although sometimes that term has been used. It's not a ownership type, although it's not just public or just private. It is permanently affordable in the sense that it is never bought or sold or developed for profit. I'm sorry, I'm looking in the wrong place. And that was revolutionary. But the Barcelona Housing Plan was only one of many, many, many cities, regions, and nations in Europe that are behind this festival and doing this work of making housing a human right, making that real. So the lead sponsor and the organizer of this festival, took me a long time to kind of winkle this out, is a group called Housing Europe. And the name, the actual name of Housing Europe, and Rains, can you actually bring up their website?
Not in the middle of this.
Oh, I thought we were going to be able to do that
Later.
Well, essentially, it's the Federation of Public, Cooperative, and Social Housing Developers. Now, I ripped my hair out because the social housing is being used in a big way to include all of these different elements: public, cooperative, which is to say resident-owned and operated housing, and social housing, basically meaning nonprofits that produce affordable housing for different groups and needs. So 46 national and regional federations, so public entities, are part of this, established in 1988, and now it's 46 federations. This happens to be in Europe, but in fact, there's countries doing other similar things that are part of the festival. So 43,000 local housing organizations, right? So national and regional federations are like the ministers of housing or our equivalent of HUD, but it's made up from the bottom up. It's a federation that starts with local housing organizations and advocacy organizations and tenants groups, tenants groups, but mostly more in the advocacy and alternative forms of affordable housing realm. 25 million dwellings. So multiply that, I don't know, by 2 or 3. That's how many people have safe, stable, affordable housing as a result of this federation. They keep track of their numbers. That's something we just hardly ever see here in our own governments, or even, how many new ones? 200,000, I'm sorry. So I'll just stop there. This is a mighty big tent coalition. It's not a coalition because it persists apart from any particular legislation. These are self-motivating behind the central goal of housing as a human right. And every local housing organization does something a little bit differently, but it's within this vision. Oh,
But you've already talked to this. So
oh, I'm sorry. I'll just keep moving on, but it's a great group. The other group that I was very impressed by, but haven't learned as much about, is the International Union of Tenants. This predates anything. This predates the UN, and sort of broke down during World War II, but started up again and has been active. It's also a federation, a cooperative federation of local tenant unions forming state tenant unions, or and then a national tenant union, and then an international union. It's currently operating in 27 countries. It supports itself mostly by its own membership dues, has its own convention, and it publishes a national status report. This particular booklet they gave out at the festival, and it reports on the again, the social housing, they're using that big term, within each country. And the highest country in Europe is the Netherlands. I think many people may have heard about Vienna, but that's lower on the list, the Austria. But it's in Spain, where we were hosted, it was just 2%. But there's a big range, but essentially folks are keeping track of the numbers in their own city, in their own country, and in Europe, which of course has its own governmental parliamentary system. Next, I'm blathering on. Okay. So what can we learn from this? So one is that I wanted to bring to where we are here in the US. So we have many components of this system. One of the impressive parts in the Barcelona is that there's a region, like a metropolitan area-wide, several groups. One is called Sostra, and they help people create housing cooperatives. And these limited equity or zero equity housing cooperatives, which are then governed and managed, but with assistance, governed and managed by the residents. This is something our public housing here in the US, we actually had a whole little mini movement in the 80s for resident governed, resident managed public housing. And that, just to think of that was being discussed and debated and brought up. And then the administration shifted, the winds changed, and suddenly I never heard about it again. But there are public housing authorities that empowered the residents of particular buildings to act like a cooperative. So before that, let me just share, before that, we had a national policy of supporting cooperatives. And that also disappeared under the Reagan era. Training, handbooks, like how to become, it was called homeowner, no, it's called working class home ownership. And it was promoted heavily from the 30s to at least the 70s and 80s. And right now, only one program under the federal government still exists, and that's for senior cooperatives. But I wanted to announce in this one arena of cooperatives, because the US has 150 years of what we would now call social housing. Here's a whole, this is not even the complete list, but it's like each generation discovers, oh, maybe we can create housing for ourselves. Now we have people living on the streets in tents and vehicles, realizing this same thing. And our government, of course, our government policy has been co-opted and undermined for all of this for many, many years. But this is our history, our heritage. So
Betsy, there's a
Yes.
note. There's a note on the chat from Bruce Wolf.
Oh, hi,
So-
Bruce.
San Francisco Community Land Trust has several zero equity co-ops. Maybe you want to ask him to say something.
I'll wait till
we-
later. Bruce and
we-
I are part of several coalitions, so it's great to see him here.
Norma, we're waiting until Betsy closes and then we're
Yeah.
going to speak.
I
Okay.
can call on him for sure because he is very much in the trenches around a lot of these issues, and I respect him greatly. Thank you, Norma. So I wanted to mention, because I just found out about it myself, there's a national incubator program to train people to start co-ops. Now, trainings have been offered, you know, on a small scale here in the Bay Area. But I think if any of you are familiar with the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, which is still working its way through various communities, but was opposed greatly in most cities that were where there was a grassroots group wanting to start them. So cooperatives, resident ownership on a piece of land that's owned either by a public actor or by a community land trust is one of the, in my opinion, best new tools, because you know, we can get into that later and maybe Bruce can talk about it too.
So what did you have?
So there's this incubator and I can speak to it if anyone's interested. Yeah, I'll just keep going. It's based out of New York, which has the largest number of cooperatives, both market rate and zero equity and limited equity. I mean, this New York City has had this pioneering form of housing for 100 years at least. So they're training people in how to help other people start more co-ops. So,
And you're a part of it.
and a bunch of California CLTs showed up at the are enrolled.
And remind people the
Community Land Trust. Community
what's
Land.
the other one, CDC.
Community development corporations. These are nonprofits that have led the way in housing, often rooted in specific neighborhoods or particular racial, ethnic leadership that's, yeah, culturally appropriate. So I'll skip through this quickly, but there's about there were about 400,000 cooperatively owned housing units in the US. It's dropped. That were limited equity or shared equity being a preferred term, or zero equity. And now hearing many of those have become market rate. I won't go into too much more, but just to say there's plenty of co-ops here in California, even though they're largely invisible to most housing policy people. They have persisted and grown. So California cooperatives are about, I can't quite read there, but they're about 5% of the total in the US. So I wanted to speak to, I'm going to wrap up. Like I said, I'm not going to go into every kind of what might be called social housing. It's really, social housing is like a strategic communication term. Historically, it's been used for all sorts of concepts, you know, group homes for the developmentally disabled, or but really in this case, what I saw in Europe, what I saw with the all of the festival and with the Federation Housing Europe is what they've agreed to is it's permanently affordable, never to be sold or operated for profit, so that and that there's a whole wraparound vision of and paradigm of like more, but of how cities should operate and how they should be participating. But I just want to call out the largest tenants group here in California. It's a big tent. It's not one group, it's a group of groups. It's has, I think, close to 100 different membership groups, including tenant unions from many cities and community land trusts, a few community land trusts. Tenants together. I know Julia has been active with that, and other people. Julia Cato, our own former chair of the Berkeley Tenants Union. And of course, now we have many other tenants. Actions. All right, I'm being coached. I just want to say we have this opportunity. There's been an enormous amount of effort to organize tenants around the state because we have more renters and they're more exploited than ever before. So Tenants Together, I admire. They have monthly calls, and I would like to encourage everyone on this call to go look at their website if you're not familiar with them, to join if you can, and more specifically to endorse their tenants' bill of rights, which looks pretty close to the UN definition of the right to housing terms that we were discussing. And it's actually very close to the Biden administration. The White House put together a proposed Bill of Rights. They haven't launched it yet, but I think it's worth looking at. And here in California, I'm a little unclear, but I don't think this has passed yet. Julia, do you know?
I thought I saw.
So this, I think it's, so this is a recommendation. I would like EBHO and public housing authorities, if they have the ability and autonomy, to also endorse a tenant's bill of rights. There's no point in creating an alternative form of housing if tenants are still tenants without any protections of rights, right? So we have a lot of nonprofit landlords, and Gray Panthers gets phone calls from people living in those affordable senior buildings who are harassed, bullied, confused, and there needs to be clarity about all tenants, all renters. And that is what the UN, and that is what the international lesson, that's what I saw happening in Europe, is still to be developed. And I think we should here consider allying ourselves with Tenants Together, no matter what we do in the housing field, endorse the Tenant Bill of Rights. So I'm asking, actually, particularly my fellow Gray Panther chapters here in California to consider doing this and to use the tenant rights issue and support for housing as a human right to question all candidates for office. And last, it's not really lastly, but I want to encourage all of us to be aware that SB 555 by our local Aisha Wahab, senator from Fremont, that a bill was passed that identifies, requires a study group on permanent affordability as our state housing policy. And the term social housing was dropped from the title of this bill, and another definition of social housing was used by another bill that failed. So I'd like to see us participate in the study group and start lobbying to be part of the study group. And as far as I'm concerned, any group you're part of, let's make sure we're part of this discussion of SB 555 about what is the creation of a definition of permanent affordability and then working state policy towards that definition. We also have the Bay Area Housing Finance Agency here in the Bay Area, which is raising, I believe it's going for $20 billion. And I don't know what definitions they're using. Public discussion is going to open soon. And so let's get involved in those public discussions and work. I just see an opportunity to work for a model like the Housing Europe and to create and track what is the stock of permanently affordable housing across a range of needs and across a range of groups, but just work that and shape that discussion about who gets counted, who gets funded, and where we need to go as a East Bay or Bay Area or the state. All right.
And I believe that there's been public comments at BAFA already, that they're already ongoing. So just a FYI.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
they aren't involving grassroots groups at the moment.
I'm not saying whether they are, whether they aren't.
Yeah.
I'm just making a statement that public comments have been opened up already.
Excellent.
And so there are grassroots groups that have been attending. because I've actually attended some of them to kind of see. But be that as
Thank
it
you,
may,
Elaine.
we just
Yeah.
kind of want to put that out there. And Betsy, we really want to thank you for this extremely informative presentation about social housing and how it is applicable here in North America and specifically California. Thank you so very much. And I'd like to, Bruce made a statement, Bruce Wolf, about San Francisco Community Land Trust has several zero equity. I really like him to explain that. What does zero equity co-ops mean? If he could.
He may be off the call now. I know it's messing in.
I can share what that is, but if someone else wants to take it, I'm glad for it. So do you want me to take it, Arlene, or do you want to skip to another question? Or
I don't see any other, that was the only statement that I kind
okay,
of see that really
I
caught out.
think it's important, but within the sphere of housing cooperatives today, they
Mhm.
are legally defined documents that, so the original documentation is basically a group of people own and operate housing for themselves. And it's a corporation, just like a nonprofit is a corporation. IBM is a corporation. A housing cooperative is a legal form of collective organization. And most cooperatives, they're set up to be housing for the members, but the members put in the money. And it used to be a group of people could put in the money and buy a building or buy a piece of land and then pay to construct an apartment building. And there are hundreds of thousands of these around the country. Another category of housing cooperative, though, really is the arena that's most of concern for us. It limits the equity. In other words, the equity you pay in to have a unit, to have the right to live in a unit, or own a unit, depends on how it works. And when you own the unit privately as an individual, you sell the unit for whatever the market will bear. And there are many of these in New York City, and co-ops are a little bit less than private homes and condos because of the complications of shared governance, but the market rate is market rate. Limited equity means that when you put in your money or your down payment, whatever you want to call it, you put in a money to buy a share of the cooperative corporation, you're only going to get back a certain, like maybe 10% on your investment, or when the unit is sold, the price is set by the membership, and the corporation as a whole, the cooperative as a whole, gets a portion of the profit. And guaranteed, the research is very clear, cooperatives have lower rates of foreclosure, lower rates, and their prices are about a third less, at least a third less than private or for-profit housing for private homeowners. But a portion of cooperatives are set up, and this is the type of cooperatives that HUD, Housing and Urban Development, set up specifically for the poorest Americans. And that is, you don't have to pay anything more than a deposit to move in, and you essentially rent, but you rent with a stake in governing and maintaining the whole property. And not everyone, and some of those are essentially look like affordable housing, except they look like, I'm sorry, they look like public housing in many cases. And in some cases, they haven't kept up a culture that says, wait a minute, we own this, or at least we govern this. And so zero equity means that you don't need to have a pot of money behind you. Even the cooperative, limited equity cooperatives might be $2,000, $5,000, $17,000, 22, what?
To join.
To join, to enter. And joining means that you now own, you co-own the entire building or set of buildings.
And so zero means that you don't have to pay a fee in order to enter into it. versus
Yeah.
having to pay a fee. Okay,
Well,
So-
and yeah,
yeah,
thank you.
okay. I'd like to ask the audience, does anybody want to respond? Does anyone have any statements that they would like to pose during this, after this presentation that we've just witnessed? Anyone?
Okay.
Okay,
Julia has a hand.
Julia?
Okay, I just, is my microphone on? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to say that limited equity co-ops limit the amount you can resell them for. So it keeps it permanently affordable. That's why the equity is so limited. They can't make a money, they can't just, people can't just come in and buy them and then live in them a few years and sell them at some ridiculous profit. And that's why
Oh.
they're so significant and important to our low, affordable housing community. That's
Thank you,
all.
Thank you, Julia.
I-
Norma, we're sticking to the subject, so if it's related to the social housing topic and it's brief, sure, go ahead. You're on.
All right.
Oh,
Norma?
yes. Okay. You calling on me?
Yes.
No, Norma.
Oh.
Norma has her hand
Art
raised.
was first on the
Art
list.
was first. Okay, Art is first in the queue. Go ahead, Art.
Okay, two questions. Betsy, what was the most exciting thing you learned while you were in Europe? And secondly, besides joining tenants together, what else would you suggest as a priority for areas of activism for us here in creating more affordable housing?
Well, people still call, people still need, they're in crisis and urgency, and I respect and want to support organizing groups that are building a base of support, like ACE, where people are going, might be door to door or church to church, and inviting people in to learn about this stuff. I'm not good at that, I'm good at this, thinking like Arlene, thinking systems and big picture. And I think it is absolutely critical that we make sure that the BAFA, this Bay Area Funding Agency, has a place for community organizing, tenant organizing groups at the table, and the homeless, people who are homeless are still human beings with thinking brains. Not many people are in crisis, but the level of ingenuity and strategy, I think we also should be including the voices of the unhoused who have ideas and have organization. I'm thinking particularly the National Association of Vehicle Residents. We're having I don't live in a vehicle, but they're having a summit in June. So getting interested and having a big tent and not restricting ourselves just to, no, that's not that one.
They're not.
So I think collaborating and having at least one person in your Panther chapter who's reaching out and talking to the non-professional housing justice organizers and advocates can be an incredible personal experience. That's not what I got out of the festival, because but I saw that was a missing voice there, and they care about, they're having wars and climate disasters are understood. They're going to create millions. They've already pushed millions of displaced people into European countries. And this is one place where that's seen and understood and want to be incorporated and planned for. The housing. The most exciting thing to me was to see this federation, this big tent federation of public, nonprofit, and cooperative housing developers or managers of housing, because just talking to each other, we're stronger. And this particular federation has an incredible statement of vision and values about what they are committed to. And you could say that's just pieces of paper and words, but
And-
there
and-
was a real energy and commitment. And I would love to see some of that, us fertilizing each other and collaborating. We don't have
And-
to, yeah.
And
thank
I
you.
want to piggyback off of Betsy that there's a national chapter of Gray Panthers, right? And so what other Gray Panthers throughout the country are involved in this? And so have we even spread the net out in our own house, for lack of a better way to say it? Like, how many people even know about it? Has there been a presentation for the national? So anybody that's in anything national, we want to begin to spread the word, not only here in California, but throughout the country, because it's not only impacting the country, this state, but we also it's being impacted throughout the country, especially with real estate investment trusts, hedge funds, et cetera, that's constantly extracting, and how we could move in a different direction.
Thank you,
And-
Arlene.
Mhm.
And I would say, Art, do you think I've successfully brought this message to the National Council, which is fairly small? It's about 12 chapters.
Well,
I don't
We
think
could-
I have. I don't think we have. So,
Okay,
and what's
so-
important is this strategy is not top down. This is me, but I think many of us want to see a more democratic base for these solutions, because the people who are closest to the action are the people who should be setting the guidelines and designing the accountability systems and managing the housing at the lowest is not the right word, but closer to the people who
those who are being the most impacted.
yes.
And so
and-
Norma,
yeah.
Norma is waving her hand at the
Yeah.
screen. Hey, Norma, we want to give Norma an opportunity to.
Yeah. One of our
Hello,
We want to keep it.
everyone.
We want to keep it. We want to keep it at.
I
3.
will, I
Okay.
promise.
Thank you.
Betsy, snap, snap, snap. I can't snap my fingers anymore, but the way you went about it was just lovely. I'm wondering, well, first of all, I want to make sure, does everybody know that there is a place, I got mine in the 3 dots at the bottom of my screen. There's a place called reactions, and in that you can raise your hand just to make sure everybody knows how to get involved in this. Well, you could raise your hand, but we can't see everybody at one time. So getting back to, I'm glad I made a note to myself, now let's see. Did Betsy, I got in here late, did Betsy make a reference to the social housing that went on in the early 1900s?
150 years. Yeah.
Hello,
We
Betsy?
didn't. We didn't.
Sorry.
We didn't.
Okay,
Go ahead, Betsy.
well,
Yes. But go
were
on.
you going to say something? Did you get into the thing? See, it's so instructive to know what the people, the immigrants, the communists, the Jews that came to the United States in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, what they did because of their political background, which has been totally denied to the United States people. So if there can be an intention to make sure that that is commented on, or if anybody has a question about what I'm talking about, and I've just said what it was, is that people ran their own housing in the early 1900s. They were a bunch of socialists, and it all got stolen away from them because that's the system we live in. The American system of we will grab whatever you get or whatever you want and take it away from you and sell it back to you at unobtainable prices. Okay.
Yes, Norma, I actually had one slide documenting just
Oh,
a
good.
few of the
Good.
150 years of what we would now call social housing, but essentially of cooperatives and communes, and many of them still exist.
What I'm saying is
Many failed. We're still learning how to do it, but
they failed because the stuff got stolen from them.
well, I'm
Which
gonna
is-
say that
Which is
I believe
why that's why people hate
Not-
Stalin.
Okay.
Stalin just
time
said,
for us,
I-
yeah,
We want to keep this moving because we want to be respectful of people's time. And oh, I'm sorry. For the sake of time, because we are running
What
out of
is our
time.
time?
And so we have Dominique here and we want to be respectful of
Well,
her time.
absolutely, absolutely.
And so we have like, I would like to hold the statements until after Dominique presents, and then we can resume the statements from Jenna, Michael, Maria, and Richard, please. Thank you. And so I would like to present Ms. Dominique Walker to present to us at this time. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I would just like to thank you all for the work that you all do on a daily basis and also for inviting me to speak today. I guess I'll start off about speaking about my trip to Barcelona this April and some key takeaways for myself and represent Moms for Housing. We were invited to, and I know I don't want to butcher the name, I'll just say it in English. It's an encounter. And it was a 2-day activist convening in Barcelona where we toured places where folks had occupied land. And it was a time for us to connect and share our struggles. And it was my first time traveling internationally. So that was amazing opportunity for me. But what I learned is power structures are the same. And it's important that we build power. That was one of my key takeaways because I asked some of the, like they were having encampments and they built like centers and gardens and everyone is riding bikes. So they have a bike shop on land that they have taken over to stop the development of and speculation going on in Barcelona. It was so similar to the things that we're up against in the Bay Area. It's really important that we organize with each other. So one of the things that Moms for Housing is working on is doing an international convening, probably on Zoom. We want to do it in person in the future, but next year it will probably be on Zoom to connect. And another takeaway is that we have to be radical because these speculators, these corporations, they are moving, they are finding loopholes in our laws, they're doing whatever is necessary to gain capital. And we have to have power to push back against that on the ground and locally, local government. That's some of the things I learned there. There were a lot of neighborhoods in Barcelona where we were, and each neighborhood had their own tenants union. And each one of those tenant unions focused on the specific issues of that neighborhood. And I thought that that was really neat. And one of their mottos is like, you're in the tenants union and you use it like a vaccine. So folks are in the tenants unions that are not having like rent issues at the moment, but just to prepare themselves for what is going to happen in the future. And I think that that was just so important to my way of thinking, because if you think about it, like people come to even Moms for Housing when they're on the face of eviction, like when they're about to get evicted and they need support. I'm like, what if we were already organized? We could show up different and with more of a force if we were already constantly every day doing the work. And I don't know what else folks wanted me to talk about.
That's very personal level that you brought it to us on. And I failed to mention that Dominique is a participant with Moms for Housing, who took over the house in the city of Oakland from the big real estate Wedgwood company. And it is now a housing and wraparound services for moms and children. They offer resources. And one of the things that she mentioned that's really critical is that before we get in crisis, because that's what happens, by the time people get to the need and are seeking out assistance, we're already in crisis. Whereas when she was talking about the vaccine, is before you get to the crisis level. And so I really appreciated even the way that you described that, because it's really important, because so many people are in crisis and unable to handle so many things because we're constantly living in a state of crisis in our health, in our housing, our daycare, our economics, our employment, education, reentry, veterans, LGBTQ, parents. We just have this whole wheel of people that are constantly in crisis because of the situations that's perpetrated here, not only here in North America. This is a global thing. And so I really appreciated the way that you spoke about the vaccine and how can we begin to develop that? Because it's not just about the organizations joining this particular thing, but the people that's going to speak about what's wrong with them. Because the top heads don't necessarily always know. So I appreciate you so much, Dominique. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Dominique.
And now we're gonna resume back. We're going to circle back. Thank you so much for even being here, Dominique. I appreciate all you guys
Can I
here
ask?
today.
I need to ask her.
Thanks for.
You told me I can't, okay. Can you hear me, Arlene?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I put a little bio of Dominique. I'm so grateful you, and to both of you for
I got you.
pulling
got
this
you.
out. Okay,
I got
and I
you.
just want people to understand, see if Dominique, if you would like to say a few words about the different organizations you're part of, in addition to Moms for Housing. I don't know if you want to say a few words.
Yeah,
about
because
ACE.
we didn't
So
mention
ACE,
C4C.
ACE.
Come on now.
Well, I'm talking about ACE, which
And
has,
I'm talking about C4C.
okay,
in
we can, if
addition
there's
to
someone
ACE.
here from, I'll stop. We wanted to hear from groups that are frontline in this housing justice, housing development, finding anyone who's in a frontline organization working on these issues. We wanted to at least hear whether you or your organization, how you are responding to housing as a human right, or what your particular specialty and expertise is in. So if there's anyone else who might want to share, or if Dominique would want to share about some of the other work, that's great. But I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, I can share. As far as Moms for Housing, we were founded on the belief that housing is a human right. It is our birthright. It should not be commodified. So we absolutely believe in that. We work boots on the ground, working to get development for low income and zero income housing, because we need that as well. And also doing policy work with the city of Oakland. And one of the challenges that we come into, like for instance, Carol Fife had something go to council, and it was passed unanimously, to turn the old Navy base into emergency housing. And it was passed, but here we are years later and there's no implementation. So what the things that we're struggling now with is the city administration and everybody that are supposed to work with the implementation. That part is not happening. But we're continuing to organize. I'm not boots on the ground with C4C, but we work with them directly with Moms for Housing and with policy work in the city of Oakland, and also direct actions. I am also a rent board commissioner in the city of Berkeley. And right now, one of the biggest things is getting the ballot measure. It is Berkeley tenant protection and the right to organize ballot measure. So if you're in the city of Berkeley and you haven't signed that ballot, please, you can contact me. I'll come by and get your signature. A lot of the landlords, they have a ballot measure coming and they have their signatures. We are trying to get our signatures. We're hopeful that we'll get them, but they're basically trying to gut our rent protections in the city of Berkeley. And that's something that we're working hard to fight against. It seems like a lot of the work that we do on the rent board is closing loopholes that landlords have figured a way around. So that's a little bit of what I'm doing. And if you have any questions, I have like 5 more minutes and then I have to go get my daughter because it's an early day here in Berkeley.
Thank you. And Rains just put up your flyer, the flyer. Oh, he's about to.
And also, if you have any questions, and because, for the sake of time, she has to go get her baby, and maybe you could pass it, put it in the chat, and maybe we could pass it from Great Panthers to Dominique and, in one form letter, and, maybe even come and do some presentations. Who knows? I don't know. But just of course, because it's all about collaboration, because that's where our strength is going to come from. We all have to collaborate. And so, any questions, anyone?
I do. How do you sign for the tenant's protection? The petition?
Oh,
How can we do that?
we are canvassing, right? Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
we're canvassing right now. Actually, it's some volunteers canvassing in my neighborhood. But if you need to sign, we can have somebody come by and sign. I live in District 2 in Berkeley. In Berkeley every day. So if you want me to stop by so you can sign a petition, I'm willing to do that. I can drop my number. Let's see.
Your email or some
Email, I
contact
guess,
information.
email. Yeah, I'll put my email in the chat, and if you need me to come by so you can sign, we're trying to have our signatures in. We need to have them in by Friday. So before Friday, I can stop by and have you all sign, and I'm dropping my email in the chat right now.
Thank you so much.
Friday.
Yeah.
Cheryl, I know where you live. I live 2 blocks away. I have petitions. I'm back on Friday, unfortunately. Will that work? Can I get a signature on Friday and have it be valid, Dominique?
I'm not sure. I think the cutoff might be 5 p.m., but I don't know if you have Leah Simon Weisberg's information.
Yeah.
She is coordinating the petitions to be turned in, so she would have that information.
Okay, thanks. But I'll be your backup because
Excellent.
Thank
I love network collaboration.
so yeah.
Art has a question.
Thank you.
Dominique,
We actually have
what tenant protections are under threat or being taken away in Berkeley? Is one of them rent control?
It's not actually rent control, it's just amendments to our ordinance. There's specific ones, and if you want to know like that, I just don't have it all. The ordinance is like 200 pages or something, so I can send you the specific thing that the landlords are trying to do. And if you go on, I think it's eastbaytenants.com. Let me see, I think I wrote it down. I can send that to you. It has exactly what the landlords are trying to take from our ordinance and what we're trying to do specifically to strengthen the ordinance. All of that. Let me see if I can find it. I'll drop it in the chat before I jump off.
And if you have to go first, we've got people who can do that behind the scenes and back you up.
Okay. Thank you. I really have to jump right now because I
Yeah.
have to go get my daughter, but thank you so much for
Thank
inviting
you
me.
so much.
And any way that we can collaborate, just let me know. Reach out to, I think you all have Moms for Housing info, our email address. And we are gonna have some things where we would love to collaborate with you all on. So thank you.
Thank you and have a beautiful day.
Same to you all.
Peace and blessings. Okay. Wow, that was awesome. We're going to go back to the responses with the hands raised. The first person in the queue is Miss Jenna.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you
Okay,
are.
cool. This is just a brief question, essentially about nomenclature. Betsy, you were talking about categories, but so what would we call the category of housing that I think of as low income, where these buildings that are run by Saha, and you referred to them, where they take a percentage. It's often a third of whatever your income is. And also, are there organizations, do you know of buildings where that have that kind of finance base, but where the tenants themselves are empowered to manage, where they literally can self-manage their buildings, either here or in Europe or anywhere internationally? And thank you for this. But it prompted that question.
Okay, so, yes. So first off, you remember the slide where I said we have 175 years of conflicting, competing, co-opted housing policy? So
Couldn't see it. But yeah.
Saha, for better or for worse, is belongs to EBHO, the whole sponsor of this. They are mission aligned, nonprofit housing developers and managers. And they
Okay.
manage the buildings that they build or buy. And they manage it. They have their own staff. There is a whole category of corporate, of for-profit housing owners, developers, managers that own 50,000, 100,000 units, and they hire private property managers to manage and squeeze the budget so they can pay back their investors. There's also, though, the way all of the category of Section 8, which is a HUD program that specifically has been limited and underfunded for many years. People who receive a Section 8 voucher are usually in the very bottom of income. They have to meet poverty standards, which is just a number set years ago with a formula.
In 1959 and has not really been adjusted, but we're not going to go there.
It is absolutely a program that's essential, but because the winds of policy change, Republicans and conservatives limited the number of public housing units that are permanently subsidized, or of any kind of units that are, I'm not saying this right. So the public policy shifted from building buildings where all the units in them were permanently subsidized to be very low cost. Instead, we went to a voucher system, and only about, I don't know, a third at most of people who would qualify for very deeply subsidized rent ever get a voucher, right? There are very few vouchers.
Closed.
When you get a voucher, well, they have wait lists, and the wait lists open up in different areas. It's a big deal. If you're looking to get on one of those lists, I highly recommend going to the Center for Independent Living or talking to because you have to get on the list, then you might someday get a voucher. And then only 16% of people who receive those vouchers actually find a place in the private housing market.
And so with the housing vouchers are basically being used with continuum of care coordinated entry service for those who are homeless. There are some that are actually getting it that are not in that category. The bulk of the housing is for those who are participating in coordinated entry services, who are disabled, who might be under some sort of violence, intimate partner violence. There's certain categories, but the larger population is generally not really participating because it's such a small, limited amount, and the length of time that it takes for that to happen is really quite long.
So absolutely.
Do you see Margot's comment in the chat, people?
Reagan cut public housing, and we're still suffering from this. Yes. Those of us who are blessed with age and memory know that these programs have come and then been cut back.
Yes.
And just to say that before the homeless crisis really reached peak, there was just the one program called Section 8 vouchers for the poor, for people who were, an individual makes less than $14,000 a year. And I am critical personally of the fact that let me back up. So that was a program that's still going on, And there are still new vouchers, and it's not just for the currently homeless. Another set of vouchers, a program with a different name, was set up for people who are homeless, right? And I don't know how different public housing authorities work their different pots of vouchers. And maybe there are no more Section 8 vouchers, but they existed. And there are people living on those vouchers who have been living in senior affordable housing here in Berkeley. It's Redwood Gardens, Harriet Tubman.
So kind of
But
after the
there's a
80s.
variety of tax credit. There's a whole bunch of complicated things that make any given unit less than market rate. That's all.
So to not go into the weeds,
See,
in the
it's-
80s, we no longer were really distributing public house, Section 8
we weren't
vouchers.
building. We weren't allowed to build any new public
In
housing.
1998, they stopped building with the Fair Cloth Amendment. They stopped building public housing.
No, I'm agreed. Yeah.
And so now we lost, here in the state of California, we lost over 15,000 units, and they have never been replaced, and there's no conversation about it. But that's another conversation. But it's basically housing choice vouchers that are now being used. RCD, satellite housing organizations that are nonprofit are now the participants that are building the housing. The largest management that is extracting a tremendous amount of money to me, and bad management, well, okay, I'm going to keep it to myself, is John Stewart, is the largest manager of housing here in the state of California. And I don't even know nationally, but I'm just going to throw that in.
I will just say, go into the weeds just a little bit. Any building that has been built by a mission aligned and is owned by a mission aligned will at least have the intention of fair and just management. And if they hire a private company to manage them, it's arm's distance. I will just say the ownership is your first line of inquiry. If it's owned by an incorporated nonprofit that has explicitly their mission is to support affordable housing, then you will have stable and legal rents, if you're in a for-profit company and there's even some that gain nonprofit status, but if you're owned by a for-profit corporate type owner, landlord, there's even worse exploitation that can happen. And they have contracts. And when that contract, a 30-year contract, correct me if I'm wrong, Arlene, but most of the affordable housing is done through a contract with HUD or with the city. And when that contract expires, some owners, and it's already happened, just sell the building for market rate. They're not committed to permanent affordability, even if you disagree what is affordable, and even if you don't think they're serving the community. And that is one of the issues with why we need to define permanent affordability and focus on increasing that housing stock. Otherwise, the owners of Harriet Tubman may be able to sell. They have a long contract, but many other buildings across the country and in California have been sold and gone market rate, or they're able to raise the rents. The rents get raised according to the area median income, which has nothing to do with you yourself with a fixed income, right? You're going to get charged. And if you can't pay the increase, then you'll be evicted.
And the thing about it is that we know most of this is not supply and demand. It's very manipulated. Algorithms, real estate investment trust investors who are driving up prices, and we can't ignore that. And so as a result, this is where we sit at. And so when you look at back in the 80s, when Reagan was in office, DC was the first place where they actually began the point in time count because of this impact on housing. It started there, and now here we are in 2024, how many years later? But with that being said, continuum of care started here, in 2014, where they actually started implementing this whole circle of things. But that's just for those who are
And that
homeless.
was specifically for people who were homeless. So
Apparently,
the
Right.
I
continuum
guess
of
we got
care.
more wrong. I'm gonna have a lot of problems.
Can I ask Arlene, could we call on Richard and Michael David as
First we have Maria.
as chapter leaders? We're never
Oh,
gonna
okay,
see
sure.
them as
Sure.
much. Is that all right?
But I don't want to leave out Maria. Maria has
No,
her
no,
hand.
I'm just asking for people who are not, people who are part of other organizations that are doing housing work in some way. So
Okay, so-
that was our priority for guests. And Maria, of course, you know where we live.
Well, can I go?
Well,
So who are you calling on, Arlene?
Richard.
Thank you, Arlene. Our focus is primarily on senior housing, being a Great Panther chapter, seems natural. And what I wanted to talk about, it's not only where we should be going, but also where the National Council of Great Panther Network should be going. And it seems to maybe there's a tension here. So what I'm hearing is you folks seeing housing as a social movement. That, in other words, tenants should get involved politically to basically, and they are and have been, and they should be encouraged to get involved and basically create their own housing opportunities and control them and be in charge of them. And of course, it has to be on
That's one possible outcome.
Right.
That is not might not work for seniors to do that. They might not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're going to let Richard speak. We're going to let Richard
But
speak. Go ahead, Richard.
On the other hand, I look at it as a funding issue. Where's the money? And so our emphasis so far has been on looking for where's the money to encourage our local elected officials, housing authority people, and all the rest to basically create more housing. It's not so much coming up from the bottom, it's coming down from the top
So
in terms of where the money is.
This is what your chapter is doing. I'm sorry.
Let me finish. So I would like to know about whether there's any examples of those two approaches coming together for seniors. I mean, we have, there's something appealing about a bunch of old people standing with their walkers in the air, shaking it, saying, give us the housing we deserve. And so there's something appealing about that. And yet, is it realistic? Are there examples of this actually happening? So that's where I'm at in terms of what do I take back to my chapter. With that, thank you.
And so going to the BAFA meeting, right? So the BAFA is the Basic Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, right? And so there are certain groups that have been attending. One of them is St. Mary's, and the seniors. And they actually attend the meetings and participate in public comments. And so there are some that are already participating. So when you mentioned that about seniors, here we are, all of us we're gray haired. And when you go to the meeting, you see all of these seniors. So it is, certain things are happening where people are participating in this movement. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there to you.
Excellent.
If you do go to the BAFA meetings, you will see that. If you go to other governmental agency meetings, you will see certain participation of seniors.
Madam Chair, may I respond as well?
We wanted Michael to speak.
Okay, I'll talk to you offline, Richard, about Santa Barbara.
Please.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments. I've been part of the subcommittee for the National Council of Great Panther Networks, and we've been meeting for well over a couple of years, about these issues. And we've had a lot of speakers come to us. We've looked at a lot of information. We're trying to write a paper now to represent some of the ideas to get other people involved. And I've taken responsibility for working on the first chapter. I've worked on that for several months now. I wrote a chapter that basically talked about the investment, investors that are buying up housing, the venture capitalists as a way of parking their money in a way that they think will go up. So if they control all the housing in a city, for example, they can control the rents and they can make a lot of money doing that, driving people out. Anyway, today I'm living in my sister's apartment, which is a rent-controlled apartment in New York City. I'm here to help her die. She has stage 4 cancer. And so I'm suddenly in this situation of living in New York City in a rent-controlled apartment. And it's been a real culture shock for me. My sister's been living on her Social Security. She's a brilliant person. She's worked the system. She got her apartment in 1978, and she's paying $712 a month in rent. Now, she won't be paying that much longer because she won't be alive much longer, but that's the history here. Now, I'm looking around trying to understand what the city is and how things work. She's in Calvary Hospital in the Bronx, so I'm taking 2 buses and a train, or 2 trains and a bus to get to see her. And all this is underwritten by the city of New York, because the fares are very cheap compared to what they're actually offering. What I've learned is she has a good friend who owns the building next door, and I was talking with him about it. Her building is now co-op. That means that the apartments have been sold by a realty firm, and the building is owned by a co-op. But she's paying $712 a month in rent because of rent control. And when she dies, the apartment will revert to the co-op, and they will sell it for probably a couple of $1 million. That's the fair market value of where she lives. What I've learned from my friend is that her $712 doesn't even pay her fair share of property taxes. And that kind of set me back to thinking about property taxes and how that affects housing. We're talking about government finance, the government budget. And when you start looking at that, we look at how much is now drained federally by the debt. More than half our federal taxes go to payment on the debt. That's a fact. So our government doesn't have a lot of money to give us back for our taxes. There's a whole lot of governmental debt where they've done fast and furious accounting games. And instead of maintaining the streets and maintaining our roads and so forth, they've spent their money on other things, or they didn't collect enough money to adequately provide for the public good. So I think in terms of any kind of long-term housing, we have to look at the actual finances behind any housing that has to pay. And one of the basic things is property tax. Now, my personal situation is we don't have a mortgage anymore. We own our home free and clear, but our taxes went up 5% last year. How many years can we survive on a fixed income with our taxes going up every year? It compounds. It's going to go up more as more property is sold and everything becomes so much more expensive. So I think that a national strategy of us has to include that as a factor in how we focus on the housing problem. If we're going to be successful, we need to figure out what our values are. I agree with Betsy that housing should be a human right, but I don't know who pays for it. And until we really look at who pays for it, how we're going to have a public budget, we're not going to be able to really break free from the venture capitalists, because they own the government. They have control over who votes in the legislature. And we really need an independent strategy. So that's what I'm proposing. We continue our discussion with that. I'd like to suggest that when we get our paper written, we should share it across all the networks, with everybody getting a copy to participate in a structured discussion. We need to figure this out. I don't see a solution. I'm living in New York, and there are these incredible services that are absolutely essential. They clean the streets. They have a street sweeper, and they collect. They ticket the cars that are blocking the street cleaner. And I think that's kind of a metaphor for what we need in our we have to be able to keep ourselves clean and operating at a minimum level. And if I've talked with people who live here, I'm just amazed if they can survive in this environment. I like living on a farm in Michigan, but it's really eye-opening, and I just wanted to lay that out as an issue that I don't think has been really discussed.
Wow, thank you so much for that commentary. I'm born and bred Brooklyn, New York. And so, you know, I follow, they're talking about Save Section 9. There's a lot of public housing development that's being purchased. There's a lot of investors that have come to New York, and they have purchased a lot of public housing buildings there. So there's a big push going on.
Are they still on the tax rolls?
Yes.
Or do they
yes.
get off the tax rolls? That's a whole fairness issue.
Yeah. And so I appreciate you even bringing that up. Thank you so much. Maria has her hand raised, and then we're going to get to Betsy. Miss
All right.
Maria,
And
sorry to
Jean.
keep you waiting.
No. You're worth waiting for. And I thank you so much, Arlene. And I come from Queens. I don't know if you know that, but all right. So, yeah. And Betsy, what a phenomenal presentation. And thank you everyone for being here. I'd like to just make a few points. Being housed by Saha, the management is god awful, such that all of my proactive, let's adjust the elevators so that they don't present a tripping hazard. One literally dropped and is out of order now because they didn't listen. So whether it's John Roberts and Lifelong or whatever, I want to caution us to the co-optation of our intentions and language, because Betsy, you even mentioned, thank God, not for profit and etc. But these not for profit places, if you look more deeply, end up being exploited and again extracted from in a very profitable way. So we really have to be stealth and aware of what really is happening, just as some of the meetings that I've been to recently and town halls, because we're having elections, there's a misrepresentation of the number of homeless people. There's the bragging on how Berkeley has reduced it. No, so there's a lot of misinformation. We must really be diligent, not accusatory, not, prejudiced, but truthful in what we see, because this whole push for more housing doesn't always clarify whether or not it's for just more money. And so many of the people involved here are into perpetuating the problem so they maintain their salaries, and or for, again, the exploitation and extraction of resources, which I wish they would not waste so much of, due to, well, after the fact they're sued, or where is the money actually allocated? So yes, finances and bottom up, it's quite a complex situation, but everyone here has a heart and a brain, and I'm very, 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 very grateful. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. And you're so right about this latest point in time count. It appears as if the numbers have been slowed, but we were having, what do they call those things? When it rains, they have a title for it now. When it's in the sky, because it's so torrential. The weather was so bad on a point in time count day here that the numbers were going to be reduced. And so,
yeah, but Arlene, even more to the point, the people that, wait, let me just respond to that. The people that profess to be doing this, not that they're not great intentioned, but they don't even know where to look. I've had people asking me, where do we go to see? And I can take them there because I've been there, So again, we need to close the gap. Who's asking and who are they listening to? Because again, Betsy, the way that you integrate all of this information along with the boots on the ground, like Arlene and Dominic, it's like Dominique. I mean, it's just, we've got to be more coordinated and communicative and cooperative. And I, again, am so grateful. Thank you.
And that's why we have all of these cracks. And so we're going to keep this moving. Thank you, Maria. We're going to call on Ms. Jean.
Thank you. I live in a limited equity co-op in Berkeley, and I work for a low-income non-profit housing association. And I have assured them that the contract with the agreement with the city of Berkeley is good, and the city would not sell the property. And Betsy, I'm taking notes. I'm a little distracted, and I thought I heard you say that the city has or could sell things when the contract time expires.
So let me just say that the city of Berkeley sold all of its public housing stock, all 72 units, to a realty, it's called, anyway, I'd have to look up the name, but they sold it to an out of city potentially for-profit. And that is, they may have had an agreement with the city that it will never be, because if you own in our system, if you own, you can always sell, because it's your property, right? But the certain types of institutions are set up legally so they can never sell for profit, or they have agreed that it will never be sold, period. It will, whatever that means, or it'll be sold. In other words, you have to bake in the legal agreements to the very corporate documents. But yes, I don't think at this point the city does not own what used to be owned by the city, doesn't own anything in public housing. It sold those. And they're now, yeah, they now compete for tax credits and section, each landlord has its own formula and commitments. So
I think the question was probably about
Oh,
like
sorry.
contracts running out.
Well, so it is so frickin' complicated. But I can tell you, within the city of Berkeley, we have buildings owned by mission-aligned, Berkeley-based affordable housing developers. And you've heard they can be as potentially not conscious and good to their tenants. That's why we need and then there are others that are not even under the supervision of the city of Berkeley. And those are the oldest. I'll just share. So we have Harriet Tubman, Redwood Gardens, Strawberry Creek Lodge, and Savo Island Cooperatives. They all have different ownership and limits to ever being resold. But Harriet Tubman in Redwood Gardens, senior apartments, right? Senior apartments. They were sold to an out-of-state group called Foundation Housing, which then has proceeded to create its own little corporation, limited liability, They have done their own thing where they make money by getting they make money by refinancing the building. Those are the fees that Arlene was mentioning. And the question is, where does the money go back to? And at least in Saha, it goes into their mission of affordable housing. It goes into, so I'll stop.
And the tax credits, there's.
So I got a question.
Some got tax credits. Literally every building is its own deal.
So the
Yeah.
tenants
Some of
find
it's-
out about that ahead of time? They're not caught completely by surprise at the last
Well, the
minute?
building until, let me just say, nobody has to notify the tenants. And that's part of the reason we wanted the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, which looked good, but I can tell you, I got a whole bunch of nasty flyers that were secretly or anonymously put out or clearly funded by the realtors party, the California Association of Realtors. And they have I'm getting astray. We have to understand that the primary policy and the primary lobbyists have always been for home ownership, which seems like a wonderful thing and is in many ways, but it has but right now tenants have almost no rights. The reason I put up that 45% is because landlords don't have to tell. 45% of the city is not legally doesn't have a right to know who owns the building. So one of the international one of the tenants to tenants united, tenants together, Bill of Rights is to know who the owner is. So that may not answer your question, Jean, but where do you live? And let's
at
talk
Parker Street.
offline about the ownership of your building, your co-op.
Well, we own it. The co-op owns
Oh,
it.
excellent.
We're owners, but where I work, it's a mutual housing association. It's a form of cooperative.
Yeah.
And it's run by the board who are tenants, and there's a 50-year period. I didn't know there would be one other than 50 years. I think that only the land trust now has the power to extend it indefinitely.
Okay. So I would love, I probably can, we probably know each other from those circles. Why don't you, if you put your number in the chat, or maybe someone can put my number in the chat, or
We'll do that.
or sign up for Gray Panthers. We're having a social
I'll
next
put my
week.
email address in there.
Thank you. I'll leave it at that because some weeds are just too deep for right now.
And I want to kind of reiterate that. I want to put that out to anyone who is on here who is not a member of East Bay Gray Panthers or Gray Panthers in general, wherever you happen to be located. We invite you to join us. We invite you to attend our meetings. We invite you to come and be a part of us. Thank you so much.
No age limits. No age limits.
And I see Miss Margaret Smith has her hand raised.
Yes, hi. I wanted to respond to the how is it funded? You know, well, there's two issues really. Some of these not-for-profit housing that the city of Berkeley sold to have a deadline where the property can be sold. It was something like 50 years, but 50 years isn't very long because it's down to something like 20 years for a couple of these places now. And you know, there's just such a lack of consideration about what will happen to these places and to the tenants who live there. It's very upsetting. And you asked how it would be funded. Well, we have several things going on in the state level. One is we have to get rid of Prop 13, which limits the taxes that corporations pay. We have to get rid of Costa-Hawkins so that more cities can vote for tenant rights. We have to reconstitute the redevelopment agencies that Jerry Brown got rid of, and we have to tax the rich. And that's how we're going to fund things, and that's what we have to do at the state level. And I hope that we can accomplish that sometime in our lifetimes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that wrap up, because that is like bullet pointed that we really need to focus on, and we have not. And so thank you so much for that information, Margaret. I see Norma has her hand raised, who will be the last person, and we will wrap up.
Hi, everybody. I need to tell you this. Betsy has tried to rein this in. The way that the Soviet Union got to be able to insist on housing for everybody was they opted out of the war in 1915.
Oh.
Yeah. They opted out of the war in 1915. This means they had the ability materially to provide housing for everybody, which was part of the mandate of building the communist nation, which is the cause of all the warring and stress and debt that the imperialist countries have put up. Since then, the imperialist countries are trying, and you've all been told this, you all know this, but it's real hard to put it deep into our heads and into our structures. Our structure is to protect the profiteering by our owners. And we are, although the slavery system has changed and hugely from chattel slavery, I can't express the degree of change from that to the present form of slavery, where we go to work for our bosses and they make money off of our labor. And Marx wrote a couple of books about that.
Thank you, Norma.
Thank you,
I just-
Arlene. It's nice to see you.
It's great to see you too, Norma. Okay, this has been like a really this has been a rich conversation. I thank you for the education and for the interaction. I thank Betsy for the organization of this, for gathering what she did. Oh, Betsy and Rains. I got to bring Rains into it. And I thank everyone for attending. I thank you really for allowing us to hold a space and to think about this information and share it out to your networks. We want to spread this word out on these concepts about housing as a human right, the issues that's impacting it, what we need to do politically, the election that's about to happen. We want to push this information out to the communities that you may be involved with, whatever they might be, because this is not insulated. It's part of a big cog, and it's moving, and we're all part of that. So I just want to say, please share this out with your network, and I'd like to thank you for coming. Betsy?
I notice that we have Kiki Poe from EBHO.
She had to leave, but.
Oh, she had to leave.
She's
Oh, she
gone,
made,
yeah.
what did her comment say? Just,
Dr. Jomo, thank you so much. Betsy, I'll follow up, get more info and present you to Evo about endorsing the Tenants Bill of Rights.
ah,
Great
yay.
conversation. I love learning from all of you.
sweet. And I just want to say Arlene and Carol and perhaps others of you, Rains and I personally are members of EBHO. Even though, and so Arlene and Carol have gone through this training program and process and are still members of EBHO, I believe, you know, through
Yeah.
their leadership program, which I give them great credit for, even though they came together as an association of affordable housing developers and bankers that support them. But mostly they have moved their programs, the leadership to make sure residents and community members are involved. So maybe just encourage that. And that's great. Maybe. we'll
Yeah,
have-
I just graduated from the leadership program Friday. Myself, and there's a young lady on here, Gabrielle Pierce. She
Oh,
was
sweet.
part of my team where we had to come up with a presentation. So, hey, Gabrielle. And so we just graduated Friday and celebrated. And so I'm so happy to see her face. Lovely young woman.
Maybe you're part of that next stage of this, you know, because you're in the, yeah, just thinking about how to build this solidarity across and
Housing preservation. That's where our focus
Oh,
is
yeah.
at. That's
Yeah.
what our actually project was in the classroom. And so we're looking to kind of keep this moving, keep this moving.
So we're gonna ask people if we see you're here today. Would you put into the chat something if you know what organization you're with, if it hasn't been obvious? Just tell us something about people who's here today who are for the first time coming to a Great Panther meeting. So we're not gonna pester you with a lot of emails, but it would be helpful to know.
And we have also right up now a slide that got cut out of the slideshow, but it's related to local action that people can take.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at our next
Yeah.
Great Panther
But there is
get
a
together.
Senior Services Summit, May 31st.
But remember, this is Affordable Housing Month. EBHO is doing projects all through the month. Wood Street Common has a project. They've been working ongoing. Wood Street Common is actually the largest. I don't know if everyone knows, is the largest encampment here in the city of Oakland, which in fact they closed. And so
Oh, they swept it. They took, yeah. so-
terminology, tomato is
Okay.
closed. And so with that being said, it was the 1-year anniversary. That's the picture that you see up there with myself and Nell Myhan, who was part of the California Poor People's Campaign. And we went to the 1-year anniversary of the closure of Wood Street Commons. And so Wood Street Commons is also doing Affordable Housing Month and different projects, all from the month of April throughout the end of May, I believe it is. And so anybody that's participating in Affordable Housing Month in any shape, form, or fashion, we want to be mindful of that. Go to EBHO, go to various sites, look this information up, and try to participate and share with your network if you can't participate. Thank you.
Michael,
Well,
David, I'm
Julia-
sorry. I'm sorry for your situation. I'm sorry for that.
Julia Cato has her hand up. Julia?
Thank you. Now that we're done, I wanted to ask Betsy, it's my understanding that the degree of homelessness is far less in Europe than it is in this country. Is that the case?
Well, in some cities and countries, yes, because they certainly have the full range of mental illness, drug problems, and discrimination, but they've been better at preserving enough public housing and then social service housing to help people sooner. They do, but they recognize those challenges. The big challenge that they're also facing is, Syrian refugees, the war in Ukraine, Africans in Somalia and Rwanda, I guess it's Rwanda. I mean, people who are driven out of their own countries that have no particular, and they can't even be in their own countries or villages, So they're much closer to that kind of mass eviction, essentially from people's homelands. So I think there's and that's not always working well, So they've got those countries each have their own, circumstances, but it is, if you support the UN Charter of Human Rights, then countries have obligations to help not only their own homeless, but this large mass of people. And and it's very clear, they're clear in their statements. That doesn't mean government can't pay for everything. It's really, I think, about thinking about a third way, so I won't try to go into it more, but because I don't have the answer. I just know bits and pieces, and we all have bits and pieces of a way forward. That's how I see it, or of the issues. So let me back there. But what we do have, I did want to mention that I didn't put up the slide, but we have such a disparity between the treatment of homeowners. Mind you, the realtor party has been lobbying for home ownership, but only insofar as it increases the value, because that's where they get their commissions from and the money they use to lobby to support what they're about. And so far in this country, a homeowner gets about 6 times as much benefit from their owning as a renter gets for being low income. I mean, 6 times. That's a lot of money. And when we talk about, nobody wants to be considered rich and lose some of their wealth, but that's another piece of unfairness. Norma,
yes, it is. Yes, it is. And this book on poverty that I read recently pointed that out, that all of the people that are resentful of people getting help from the government, they pointed out that homeowners probably get more benefits than any of people on these programs.
And I don't think we're going to get change if it's renters versus homeowners, So that's why I feel it's important for us to understand who's been manipulating and paying money to keep a certain systems going. Because not all homeowners want to be screwing over the poor.
No, that's part of my work as a tenant activist to point out that for the most part, homeowners and tenants are on the same side of almost every issue, except perhaps a few rental issues and things like that. But we all want the same things for our cities. We're not natural enemies. And I resent people who try to pit us against each other.
That's a really good point. Maria Sol, what's the book on poverty? I think it's called Poor, or is it called Poor?
No, the one I call is Poverty by America.
Okay. There's another book.
It's an excellent book and I recommend it to everybody.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, Norma's mentioning we can save the chat, and thank you.
That's a good thought to close on.
And so we are officially closed. We are at 3:43. So we kind of ran into our Great Panthers time.
Well, you
but I'd like
closed
to-
it. You closed it at 3:30, but we just
Okay.
kept rolling with the